This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, we now bring you a discussion on Supreme Court decision on Nota. The participants are Professor Subrata Mukherjee, political analyst, and KV Prasad, journalist.
The last few days, the country has seen a renewed debate on an element called Nota, that is none of the above option that the Supreme Court had asked the Election Commission to include on the ballot paper. The order came in 2013, and since 2014 it became kind of necessary, and several assembly elections and Lok Sabha of course have carried. The controversy began early this week, if I may say so, is when Congress party raised the issue in Rajya Sabha, saying that the elections in Gujarat, where they're having a very tight race against the 3 seats that are getting vacant, that Nota option was introduced, and why now? So this was the question which actually led to the situation where the Congress party went and filed an appeal in the Supreme Court asking for the Supreme Court to put it on hold. The Supreme Court said that there's nothing of that sort because the order itself was issued in January 2014, and since 3 years later, what has changed for them? Things like that. So obviously the Supreme Court did not want to intervene. In any case, Professor Mukherjee, once Article 324 sets in, the Election Commission takes over the conduct of elections and no court actually interferes in the process of elections. But that having a different, but Nota itself had become an issue in 2013, actually replaces, there was already an existing proviso in the election rules, 49.0 if one may say so, where voter can walk into his voting booth and give it in writing under the rule to the election officer that he or she will not cast the vote, and the vote gets cancelled. But Nota was a different concept. It was introduced the idea when any of the candidates fielded by political parties was not to be accepted, was not acceptable to a voter, and he or she may reject taking the option, none of the above. Professor Mukherjee, the legal aspect of it and the political aspect of it, both dimensions are involved in this. If I may just ask you quickly on the legal aspect.
Well, Prashad, the important point to note that as you mentioned, that the provision was also there earlier. But then what was the need to change it? The most important point is secrecy. You see, the anonymity of the voter is an important concept in the concept of mass democracies today, and all the countries follow it. There is nothing called an open voting per se. Now, what happened earlier, as you really look to, that one could exercise Nota, but in a very different form, where his identity would be known, first to the electoral officer in the booth, and of course, by the summation that he is exercising it, there are wider people will know it. So the first principle of the secrecy would be violated, and the Supreme Court, in its direction, makes it absolutely clear, is a secret ballot, and there cannot be any compromise with it. But there is also a larger perception of the Supreme Court, and they added that this will play a role of cleansing politics. Their expectation was that if the candidates are not up to a certain standard, then the large number of the voters may exercise their negativity and by that put pressure in the political process. This is again a very noble idea. Unfortunately, in India till now, that has not happened in a very large scale. Actually, the Nota average is about 1.5% of the votes, but then it is a symbolic but an important realm of electoral reform. You see, all the time we talk of reforming the system, and the mass democracy that India has, even conducting a general election itself is an exercise. And you remember after the session initiative, now of course the voting process has become largely fair. But then again the nitty-gritties of the election remain, and here in the context of the Gujarat election, that the opposition to the Nota use was on 2 grounds. One is that it will lead to horse trading, and second important point was corruption. But both of them I don't think really come under the Nota category, because Nota is a fundamental right. That's what Supreme Court said. And how can you compromise with the fundamental right? And so, both in the context of voting right and the Nota, they have virtually equal status. So if one stays, the other would also stay.
Professor Mukherjee, you mentioned about the fact as corruption as one of the horse trading as the other charge, but these are the charges that the Congress apprehensions which had carried, and also the fact that the BJP had also gone to the Election Commission suggesting Nota may not be included in the Gujarat by-elections, biennial election to Rajya Sabha, which is going to happen on August 8th. Their argument was that Nota, because Rajya Sabha elections is an open voting, whereby the party person, the member of legislature or member of parliament who votes, would actually show the vote to the election agent and cast it, because this was introduced in 2000 year something again to issue of money in elections. This was an attempt. Having said that, they also say that a violation of a whip for election does not, because the Supreme Court in earlier directions had given that cannot be a violation of, and it does not attract the anti-defection law or penalty. At best, the party can expel the member for having voted against the party direction, but he or she would continue to remain an unattached member of the legislature. In such a scenario, efficacy of nota is what they are questioning. How do you look at that?
In the Rajya Sabha context and the other voting mechanism, open voting is an exception, it's not the rule. So by and large, the election process that is followed in any country has a larger ramification. And it has also here. And the Supreme Court made a very interesting point in its judgment that Member of Parliament can abstain. That is legal and permissible. Not voting or nota, both should be legally considered. So that, I think, is clear that nota stays either in the context of the Rajya Sabha voting or any other. And that cannot be challenged just on the basis of one Rajya Sabha election in one state. And there also the larger question of the propriety is involved. Now you refer to the anti-defection law. Anti-defection law was enacted at a particular time when there was a lot of ayaram gayaram kind of syndrome, and it was thought that it will solve largely the problem of defection. But unfortunately that has not happened. Both before the election and after, we find large defections taking place. So there are all kinds of contradictions involved in running a democratic system, and nota, I think, is an improvement, and we should try to strengthen it in all its manifestations.
In fact, the Election Commission had mentioned earlier that since 2014, when it started asking states to include nota in the ballot paper for Rajya Sabha, some 16 states or 25 by-elections, nota option was given. Of course, the Congress and other people, when they raised the issue in Rajya Sabha, wanted to give this impression this was probably being done for the first time or the implementation. The Election Commission clarified no. In fact, if you look at the international practices, several countries, almost 11 countries have the option of nota, including Colombia, Ukraine, Brazil, France, Bangladesh, Belgium, Greece. US also experimented it in a state or two. I think it's not
Texas.
So there is an issue with it, but largely there has been a... So this is not that only India as a democracy, Western democracies or even Bangladesh for our neighborhood have this option. I think the larger link of electoral reforms and the need for constantly looking at new mechanisms to bring about this is probably this is what reflects.
Well, if you really look to the entire process of strengthening the democratic institutions involved in it, you see, just the process of voting itself is a very contested one. At one time, the Burkean kind of a point, there was a difference between the actual voting and the virtual voting. That stage is gone. And now, of course, there are other important points of strengthening democracy. You see, referendum initiative recall. Now, all of them are practiced in different forms in different countries, and in India, none of them really operate. So here, I think it's a good opportunity to let the authorities know and the political parties that there is a provision which is beyond political parties. And as the intention of the Supreme Court was that this will strengthen democracy and cleanse politics.
Professor Mukherjee, the fact that nota today is in infancy, if one may say so, and you just mentioned some statistics of 1.5%, the fact also remains that even if the entire electorate, say out of in a vote of 100, 99 out for nota and one person votes for a candidate, that candidate will still be declared winner. So the efficacy of nota is probably a messaging that electorate will send to the political parties rather than the result per se.
Well, Prashad, democracy survives by legitimacy. Suppose 51% plus voters really vote against all the candidates, then I don't think that democracy can survive for very long. So it has a moral dimension, but also a long-term reformative aspect. And slowly you find that the different ways, the court is intervening to cleanse the political process. For instance, you look to the Election Commission efforts also, declaration of the assets and all that before the election, and also streamlining the media. Even, talking in terms of false news, fake news, there had been directives as a very important aspect of it. So all of them move in one direction, that ultimately the process of politics should be as fair and transparent as possible. And in that perspective, if you really look to nota, I think it's an advancement.
Professor Mukherjee, if we come to the politics of Nota that we have seen playing out in the last few days, the Congress party's real fear was the immediate trigger, if one may look at it, were the elections to the Gujarat by-elections to Rajya Sabha. 3 seats are falling vacant, including that of the political secretary Patel, Smriti Irani, the union minister, and one more member of the BJP. Against this the BJP has fielded 3 candidates, including its party chief Amit Shah, Smriti Irani being repeated as a member from there, and Mr. Ahmed Patel gets a nomination from the Congress. The BJP puts a 4th candidate. The Congress has been facing a problem of rebellion within its own ranks in Gujarat. 6 of them have resigned. The Shankar Singh Waghela faction has moved away from the party. We now see visuals of some legislatures being carted away and kept in a resort in Bangalore because there's all kind of allegations. So this is something also being looked at.
Well, this is an abnormal situation. These are not called normal politics because, as you mentioned, that the leader of the opposition, Waghela, leaves the party and some of the other followers also leave. And democracy being a game of numbers, and especially in the Rajya Sabha election, you must have minimum votes to get elected. So the Congress anxiety is understandable. But then the other important point that you have raised, that comes out of political culture. That the question will be that why do you have to move the MLAs from a particular to another and the ramifications of it. I think we should realize one thing, that compared to many other well-established democracies, our party system is weak. And since it's an extra constitutional area, not much of attention is put here. But here I like to remind you that the most important ingredient of democracy comes out of a good party system.
When we talk of party system, of course, we have 2 large national parties, and there are, of course, many other national parties which have a status of national party bestowed by the Election Commission based on certain parameters. But if you look at the Bharatiya Janata Party, the party which is currently in power, along with some of its partners, they run a coalition government, and also the Congress on the other side had led a coalition for 10 years. If you look outside of this, don't look at the left parties, which is a different kind of a structuring, or the Janata Dal. Mostly are regional parties where family or family driven.
Well, what you say is correct. That's how I said the party system is weak in India. And point that you made, that the 2 national parties, but there are a large number of other parties. So the Duverger thesis that the first past the post system will lead to the institutionalization of a 2-party system has not worked in India. And you remember Mavlankar's rule of 10% seats in the Lok Sabha, and was done with the optimism that ultimately India will move towards a 2-party system. That has not happened. And here I'd also like to remind you that Britain is also facing a crisis of 2-party system. Now the only country that remains firmly embedded in 2-party system is the United States. But the United States is a nation of minor contradictions. Ours is a major one. So a smooth change in the party system, I don't think we can envisage very quickly.
Professor Mukherjee, we're running out of time, but very quickly, the BJP having taken a stand, initially it said it was a job of the Election Commission, and which is rightly so. It also petitioned the Election Commission. So how do you look at that particular development? Because in Gujarat, they also kind of thought Nota was not required at this point of time.
It's a crucial election, Prashad. And there are 4 candidates, only 3 will get elected, and that way important. But I think all the political parties try to get certain advantage in that kind of a tight election. But I think ultimately the important point, the prerogative of the Election Commission and sanctioned by the Supreme Court, Nota continues, and that's good for the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Supreme Court decision on Nota. The participants were Professor Subrata Mukherjee, political analyst, and K.V. Prasad, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.